was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the part I played, Giles, was the font of all knowledge when it came to the world of the occult. And I have to say that Giles's fascination for the paranormal has left me a little curious. But to discover why, in a time of apparent scientific enlightenment, the supernatural should be as important to us today as it was hundreds of years ago, I'm going in search of a creature that taps into our basest instincts. I'm going deep into the lair of the werewolf. When I first began looking into werewolves, even though we had a werewolf as a regular character in Buffy, it dawned on me that outside of the man, moon, wolf scenario, I actually know nothing about them at all. In fact, I always thought the werewolves were something concocted for the movies rather than genuinely terrifying beasts. But as I really got into it, I came to realize just how widespread werewolves are in popular culture, not just in films, but even in the stories that my children used to read, from Red Riding Hood to Brothers Grimm. But when I came across the bizarre story of a murder in France, it soon became apparent that werewolves are much more than just the stuff of children's stories. This psychiatric report describes the startling case of a modern-day werewolf. In 1989, in the French city of Bordeaux, the violent death of a local man led police to uncover a story worthy of any horror writer. A 28-year-old man was arrested, and when questioned, did little to deny his part in the murder. But what set this case apart was the reason he gave for the killing. Because the man claimed the murder happened just after he transformed into a werewolf.
Si je regarde dans un miroir, je peux voir la transformation. Je sens des poils pousser partout sur moi. Mes dents commencent à pousser.
Michel Benezek was a forensic psychiatrist who questioned the self-confessed werewolf.
He believes he can turn into a werewolf, and when he does, he becomes very violent and wants to bite and hit people and drink their blood.
Je satisfais mon désir en allant visiter des abattoirs, en buvant le sang des chevaux alors qu'il est encore chaud. Mais je préfère le sang humain.
So, how does a supposedly mythical creature become the key suspect in a modern-day murder case? I need to find out how the werewolf story all began. If you look through the history books, you find that werewolves are far from a recent creation. But frustratingly, many of the facts have been lost in the mists of time. But I have found one detailed account of a strange ritual dating back over 2,000 years. It's my first real clue to the origins of the werewolf legend. To start my journey, I'm going, well, actually to the last place I'd expect to find a werewolf, Greece. I'm going to investigate a story of retribution, human sacrifice, and cannibalism. I've come to Greece to explore a 2,000-year-old account of werewolves. The account clearly details a ceremony of human sacrifice that culminated in a person transforming into a wolf. The legend even goes so far as to give an exact location for the site of the sacrificial altar, Mount Lycaon, deep in the heart of the Peloponnese, about 200 kilometers southwest of Athens. A group of American archaeologists from Pennsylvania University, led by Dr. David Romano, are planning an excavation here soon, which they hope will corroborate the stories of human sacrifice and their possible links to werewolves.
So, werewolves. I must admit I would never have connected werewolves with ancient Greece.
Well, there are many ancient stories that link this place, Mount Lycaon and the Sanctuary of Zeus, with the possibility of human sacrifice, and some of the stories involve werewolves.
What are you hoping to find here?
Well, we're hoping to find many things, but among them would be whether or not the ancient Greeks actually sacrificed humans here on this altar, which is 25 meters higher up.
Let's go and have a look. Wow. Sacrifice with a view.
This is one of the trenches that was excavated in the early 20th century by Koriniotes. He found the remains of bones, which he analyzed and found to be animal bones. But when we work here, we'd like to see if it's possible that the bones are human.
And if they are human bones, how does that relate to werewolves?
Well, the story that's recounted a number of times in antiquity is that if a human being ate of human flesh from a human sacrifice, then he would be turned into a werewolf for 9 years. And it would take 9 years of not eating human flesh for him to become human again.
Otherwise he stays as a wolf.
That's the story.
How would you say all these ancient myths found their way into popular culture? How did the werewolf make its way into the werewolf we know now?
Well, the stories were told and retold in antiquity, and in fact we have a summary of the story told to us by Augustine in the 4th or 5th century AD, in which he recounts these various aspects of the Lycaean story, and it may be from that date that Christianity picked up the story.
There is little doubt that something strange went on here. Were there really werewolves here? Or were they simply a way for the ancient Greeks to discourage the practice of human sacrifice? Whatever the case, the story of Mount Lycaon shows just how far back the legend of the werewolf dates, just how early on they became a part of our culture.
It appears that as soon as mankind began to write, stories about werewolves began to appear. Christian writers seem to have embraced the beast with a particular passion. There are references sprinkled throughout the Bible from Benjamin to Nebuchadnezzar. Here we are in Genesis, verse 27. Benjamin shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. And in the 15th century, Emperor Sigismund brought together a council of theologians who finally decided that werewolves were a reality.
I had asked Dr. Romano how werewolves went from being purely mythical creatures to becoming accepted as fact. He suggested that I travel to Paris to talk to historian Michel Mourget.
When I started looking into werewolves, I thought, as I believe most people do, that werewolves, of all the monsters, was very much a Hollywood myth. But I believe that you have evidence that people were convinced transformation into a wolf was a reality.
In fact, the image of the werewolf portrayed in films is not consistent with the old descriptions. There were indeed a number of trials based on the belief in the wolfman and the idea that a man could transform himself into a beast.
Was there one werewolf trial that stands out?
Here at the National Library, a manuscript of one of these trials has been preserved, that of Jean Grenier.
C'était la nuit dernière, alors que je gardais les moutons près de Tardiveau. L'un des moutons s'était égaré et était tombé dans un fossé.
Marguerite Poirier, a companion of the young shepherd, said that she had been attacked by a wolf-like creature.
D'où un bruit étrange venant de derrière le buisson. Sale bête! Bête! frappé de derrière et précipité au sol. D'abord, j'ai pensé que c'était un chien, alors je lui donnais un coup de bâton. Tout ce que je pouvais faire, c'était le frapper encore et le plus fort possible. Enfin, il a reculé, mais il n'en est pas parti. Il a resté, me regarder, attendre. Pourquoi tu souris? Tu es pour être tué.
Ce serait qu'agissait qui t'a attaqué.
Quoi?
C'était moi qui t'attaquais. Et si tu n'avais pas eu ce grand bâton, je t'aurais laissé bien plus que ces petits griffeurs. Je t'aurais déchiré le cou comme je le fais avec cette petite fille goûteuse de la crinière.
Grenier had a great deal to say for himself and told them at great length how he could transform himself into a wolf.
The court records of the Grenier trial provide a compelling testimony to the events of the time.
Jean Grenier, tu es accusé d'avoir attaqué Marguerite Poirier sous l'aspect d'un loup-garou et d'avoir aussi tué une autre jeune fille et un chien. Est-ce bien le cas? Est-ce vrai? As-tu commis ces actes répugnants? Mais es-tu aussi sourd que débauché?
Je vous ai entendu.
Eh bien alors réponds à ma question.
Oui. J'ai tué un chien. Mais les petites filles ont bien meilleur goût. Le chair est tendre et sucré. Leur sang est riche et chaud.
Did they find bodies?
Yes, the bodies found were those of young women who'd been killed. So Jean Grenier claimed that it was he, in the form of a wolf, who was responsible for these assaults. And indeed showed them the spot close to a tree where one of the attacks was alleged to have occurred.
Donc c'est bien ici qu'on a retrouvé les restes de Marie Richard. Oui. Pourtant, on a retrouvé sa robe, boutonnée, pliée, intacte. Donc c'est pas un animal quelconque qui a fait ça, mais bien un pouvoir surnaturel. C'est toi qui as fait ça? Réponds-moi quand je te parle. C'est toi qui as fait ça? Imbécile! Allons! Allons!
The girl's dress was found intact.
In his evidence, Jean Grenier says that one of his victims was wearing a black dress, and I quote, he drew blood without undoing the dress. And people testified that the dress had not been torn. This is something that happened in several werewolf trials, and the witchfinder general, Comtoise Boguet, said this was a characteristic of werewolves.
Jean, tu es ici car tu as admis que tu pouvais te transformer en loup, mais que sous cette forme tu aurais tué une fille, dévoré un bébé et déchiqueté un chien. Explique. Explique à la cour comment il est possible que tu puisses te transformer en loup.
Quand la lune entre dans son dernier quartier. J'ai un besoin très fort. Un besoin de rejoindre les lieux. J'enduis mon corps d'une potion. Je mets ma carte de lieu. Et c'est là que je peux commencer à courir avec ma meute.
Et que fais-tu avec ta meute?
Nous chassons, nous tuons, nous dévorons.
Alors, où as-tu trouvé cette potion et cette peau de loup?
C'était il y a quelques années. J'étais dans le bois. Un homme à cheval m'a demandé de brosser son cheval. Il me dit qu'il me payerait, me donnerait du vin quand j'avais fini de brosser son cheval.
Jean Grenier explained that one day, while out in the forest, he had met a man whom he called the Forest Master. He had given him a tin of ointment and a wolfskin, and by donning this wolfskin, Jean Grenier could transform himself into an animal.
Il m'a dit qu'il était le seigneur de la forêt et que j'étais son serviteur et que je saurais que faire quand l'heure arrive.
Oh, mais enfin, mon garçon, es-tu seulement conscient de ce que tu es en train de dire? Prenez-le.
So Jean Grenier confessed to a number of heinous crimes and to being a werewolf. What punishment could he expect?
It was easier to point the finger at human culprits than to tackle the devil. The devil couldn't be brought before a court of justice, but his accomplices in the form of witches and werewolves could be seized, tried, and burnt at the stake.
Il ne fait aucun doute que plusieurs meurtres sanguinaires ont eu lieu. Tenant compte des preuves indiscutables, il est clair que tu souffres de délire et d'illusions diaboliques. Alors la seule façon d'arrêter le diable, le malin, mon garçon, c'est la mort. Dans un cas comme le tien, il sera juste de faire une exception. Le besoin et le désespoir ont corrompu ton caractère. Et le diable a pu trouver en toi une proie facile. Afin de sauver ton âme, tu seras emmené dans un monastère où tu devras rester